Hi, everyone. My name is Pam. I am going to be chairing 3C, Cultural Resistance, Word and Image as Resistance. Thank you very much to our presenters. Before we start, I'd like to just acknowledge for those who are in the physical room, we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty has never been infringed. Just a few little housekeeping things before we get started. We're recording session today, and each person has 15 minutes to speak and then 5 minutes at the end for questions. Please try and, if you're online, be on silent while the people are talking, and have your cameras on if you can or off, but inviting people to come with their cameras on when people we're having the Q&A afterwards. Yes, and the recording's on now. So I think that's pretty much everything I need to do. I'd like to hand over to our first two speakers, which is Baljeet Kaur and CP Shruthi, who are presenting Micro-geography of letter writing by prisoners sentenced to death, an ecosystem of care, control, and resistance.
Hello, everybody. Am I audible? Just to make sure that I'm audible. Hello. Can somebody please confirm if I'm audible?
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you and see you. Sorry.
Right. Thank you. Greetings, everybody. I'll just, given the time limit, I'll just begin with our paper. So our paper talks about how the initiative of letter writing between prisoners sentenced to death in India and their legal representatives penetrated the carceral geography of death row imprisonment. During death row imprisonment, a prisoner for years undergoes highly carceral living conditions comprising segregation, 24/7 surveillance, deprivation from activities of socialization, and productive engagement. Such conditions lead to very detrimental psychological effects where a person confined in a prison further gets caged in their own mind and body. In such a carceral geography, a mindful initiative of letter writing allowed prisoners to exist in a microgeography where they experienced an ecosystem of care. Our paper, through the lens of social constructionism, analyzes the content of letters written by these prisoners over a 20-month period and observes their journey. We argue through our findings that an ecosystem of care becomes essential to introduce in the carceral geography of death row, where prisoners suffer from detrimental mental health concerns. And such an ecosystem can be created through a mindful initiative of letter writing, whose benefits for the prisoners extend much beyond mere exchange of information. Letter writing provides a platform to prisoners to gradually build lost identities and attain personal growth, which in conventional terms is also referred to as reform of prisoners. Before we take you through our findings, we would like to explain who we are, who these prisoners are, and how the exchange of letters as a means of communication turned into a more holistic initiative. My co-author and myself, we are part of an organization called Project 39A, which provides pro bono legal representation to prisoners sentenced to death in India. While we are based in the capital city, New Delhi, prisoners we represent are lodged in different prisons all over the country. To speak with these prisoners in order to discuss, say, the facts of the case or seek instructions from them, we only had two means of communication. One was to travel all the way to the prisons located in various parts of the country in order to meet them physically. But these physical visits were allowed only through a mesh-like setting, and that too for a limited amount of time, usually from 10 to 20 minutes. While conducting physical visits at a regular interval was a difficult endeavor, we started relying on the second means of communication available, that is letter writing. Prison manuals governing prison administration allow prisoners to receive, send letters to their legal representatives, family, and friends. We started sending letters to our clients every couple of months. Gradually, as prisoners started responding to our letters, it nudged us to enlarge the landscape of the content that we wrote to them in the letters. Alongside, we also sent them copies of books and other reading material to read, educate, and engage themselves. Now, during this period, three factors nudged us to rely on letter communication for a multi-pronged purposes. With the onset of pandemic, prisons across the country were turned into containment zones, and physical visits to the prisons were totally prohibited. At that time, facilities of phone or video conferencing were just starting, and its implementation was not regular. Hence, for approximately 2 years, prisoners were experiencing heightened forms of abandonment. So in that context, letters were the only means available to us to maintain some kind of communication with prisoners. Secondly, it is a legal requirement in India that to argue against the punishment of death, legal representatives of prisoners should describe their life histories, highlighting circumstances which on one hand describe various deprivations that they suffered from in the past, and on the other hand, explain how in future these prisoners show probability of reformation. Such complex inquiries required prolonged communication with prisoners, which was restricted in normal circumstances, and during the pandemic, it was completely shut down. Hence, we started attempting to use the medium of letter writing to also start conversations unearthing the various life stages of these prisoners and unearthing their life histories. Now, new scholarships from India find that majority of prisoners sentenced to death come from marginalized social communities, weaker socioeconomic status, where dropping out of school and engaging in manual labor during childhood were common experiences. Hence, the skills of reading and writing were not much practiced by them in their life before arrest. They did not have sufficient opportunities. Then after they were sentenced to death, they experience segregation, exclusion, stigmatization within the prison population because of being sentenced to death. Their carceral geography comprise of confinement in small cells, if not strict solitary confinement. They are denied mingling with other prisoners, and they are surveilled 24/7. They are denied educational and work opportunities, and even their visits to common areas in prisons like playground, garden, library, vocational training centers, etc., was totally prohibited. Further, the stigma around death sentence enabled prison authorities and other prisoners to inflict physical violence and harassment to them. Deathworthy, a report published by our organization Project 39A, found that as a result of the threat of execution, impending execution, and harsh prison conditions such as I described, emotions like these prisoners experienced trauma, psychological distress, and even developed mental illnesses. Emotions like sadness, fear, anxiety, hopelessness, frustration, shame, regret had entangled their minds and numbed their bodies. Hence, this data showed that conceptualization given by Foucault, that is the docile bodies, bodies which obey, and even Agamben's framework that incarceration results in mere biological existence. These frameworks were not somewhere sufficient to capture the effects of a carceral geography which prisoners sentenced to death were experiencing. Hence, we realized that the prisoners with whom we were writing letters, to whom we were writing letters, they were not only confined in harsh prison conditions, but also as a result were caged in their own mind and body. This is where we realized that letter writing could potentially be converted into an ecosystem of care. In the letters that we wrote to them, we mentioned information about their case, our communication with their family members. We asked them about their life in prison and their well-being, most importantly. We described a couple of current affair themes to them that were happening in the world at that time. We posed questions related to their life history. We encouraged them to keep hope and engage in productive engagements through self-growth. Prisoners responded to us not just in words, sharing information, responding to our questions, expressing their feelings and opinions, but also in the form of creative content like sketches and paintings, self-written poetries, stories, religious hymns they remembered from their childhood, and even books that they want to get published. This medium over the years became a platform for them to recount memories, write their own life histories, practice reading and writing, and expressing opinions. And very pertinently, it allowed them to form and sustain social relationships and attain self-growth.
Thank you, Baljeet. Am I audible to everyone? Just wanted to confirm that before I start.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, great. Just before I start, I would just like to say that all the beautiful pictures that you see in the background of our slides are actually paintings made by prisoners on death row, which have been sent to us with their letters. And what you see in the current slide are just different letters that we've received from our prisoners. So I'm just going to be speaking a little bit about the framework that we've used to analyze these letters and what our findings and learnings have been from having done this exercise for many years now. So the article looks at these letters from a social constructionist framework, which basically argues that communication is not just a passive flow of information between the sender and the receiver, but how it is through this communication process that we make meanings and construct our social world and our understanding of it. This school of thought proposes that individuals construct their understanding of the world and meanings they attach to encounters or conversations through the process of communication with others and not individually. So when a certain piece of information is, So when a piece of information is passed from a sender to receiver, the meaning of what is being said in that information does not happen inside an individual's head, but through the process of this interaction. It argues that people jointly construct their understanding of the world, and this generates and sustains relationships and contributes to people's sense of self-worth, which emerges through communication with others. So from a social constructionist point of view, we see how these letters penetrate a highly carceral death row environment and the role that these play in enabling the prisoners on death row in becoming empowered agents. through which they engage in a meaning-making process and construct their own social worlds and their art. The different ways in which we see this happening is how a sense of identity as a responsible person is regained when they receive a letter from us, asking them questions about their life, their routine in jail, memories of their childhood, or different parts, different periods and instances from their life. For many of these people, this was the first time that they had received the letter. This was the first time somebody had given them an opportunity to talk about their life, talk about how they're feeling, and talk about their life on death row. For many, this was also the first time somebody was treating them with a sense of dignity and considered them worthy of telling their own story and showed care towards them. Many of these death row prisoners started to write to their children or to their parents or other family members after we started writing letters to them. I would just quickly like to read one of the excerpts before I go ahead. One of the excerpts that we received, which is the first one on the slide, said, "When I received your letter, I felt like I'm not in jail at all, but rather I'm a patient in a hospital whose doctor had understood his condition and given him medicine that has relieved some of his pain." Such sentiments are actually documented in articles that have studied pen pal correspondences with death row prisoners across the globe. Janet Mabin, in her work, where she studied pen pal correspondences, says that living in a 9 by 6 foot cell for 18 to 24 years, while waiting up to 20 years to be executed, these people have plenty of time to review their lives, few sources of distraction. And for those who manage to keep their mind, they have a sharpened sense of what they value the most in the life that is left. And for many of these people, this includes a meaningful connection with other human beings. So our letters have often asked prisoners to reflect on their life or their routine in jail, and which provides them with the freedom to present themselves in the way they best deem fit, and more choice in conveying personal experiences and values. So it creates a social world where there is an opportunity to represent or reconstruct themselves as people and to rewrite their histories in new ways or reinvent memories and identities that are often lost on death row. Some of them use this medium to parent their children from jail. A lot of others use this as a medium of providing emotional support to their family members by writing to them regularly. Another way we saw them construct meanings through this process was through the way they engaged with the information from the outside and the reading material that we sent along with each of those letters. Many of them responded to what their thoughts were on the issues that were happening outside or stories that we sent them, and drew a close parallel of that with their life on death row. I'll just quickly read out one of the excerpts that beautifully spoke about life on death row, comparing that with the story that we'd sent this person. It says, "Thank you for sending me the story Gulliver's Travel. I read about how Gulliver's ship was shattered at the storms at sea, forcing him to swim all the way to the shore. When he finally touched the sand, he broke down, exhausted. Similarly, when I went to the High Court, when the High Court confirmed my death sentence, I was completely exhausted and unable to see any way ahead. But then I remembered Gulliver's journey, and it gave me strength, patience, and courage." So a lot of these people spoke about their lives on death row as being in quarantine for many years, and how there was a total blackout while engaging with our regular updates on the state of pandemic in the country. This, as described, in literature about pen pal friendships, is often called blurring of the inside and the outside. So this is not just the flow of information about the outside world to the insides of the prison, but how the microgeography of letter writing enables meaning making between what is happening on the outside and their lives on death row. So it enabled them to present a self that could maintain, pursue, recreate, reflect on their personal experiences that were lost on death row. Often, this is the sense of self that revealed us crucial information about themselves and their lives on death row, and it created an outlet for expressing emotions like hope, joy, happiness, sadness, and traumatic memories that otherwise have no outlet on death row. And their expression of self through creative mediums such as sketching or writing poems or stories or opinions is what also aided in presenting this in court as evidence of reform of prisoners, or what is called reformation. The framework of social constructionism also shed light on prisoners' artwork as reliving lost time. A lot of these prisoners responded to our letters where we sent them seasonal greetings by sending us sketches. So it showed that, through this artwork, they were reliving lost times and trying to create, a sense of community in a space that tries to isolate and segregate them. And in defying sanctions, prisoners exercised agency and personalized these spaces, resulting in a spatial modification, and offer them space to regain their personhood and rebuild their lost identity. While this ecosystem of care was operating, the carceral tendencies of the larger institution confining these prisoners was also in play. Prison rules are extremely limited. It limits the number of letters which the prisoners can send every month. There are restrictions on accessing writing material. Yes, I'm just wrapping up in a minute. Yes. Each and every letter, incoming and outgoing, was read and screened by prison officials, thus controlling the content of these letters and invading privacy. There are also instances where letters were sent by prisoners, never reached us. Our letters were never delivered to them. So there have been multiple obstructions like that. But we also saw prisoners resisting in many ways, either by handing over these letters to a family member or a co-prisoner. Some of them also requested prison staff or jail guards to send us a photo of their letter. Some even took the risk of sending photo of their letter through mobile phones, which they are not permitted to use inside prison. That's largely about our paper, but I think I would just like to say one thing before I conclude. It is that our learnings have been that in circumstances where communication with the outside world is largely limited to speaking over email or over text, it is striking to see how rich the resources of written language are and how resourceful letter writers can be in overcoming barriers of time and space, and to create an emotionally intense and mutually rewarding relationship with strangers. And since meaning making is happening on both ends of the spectrum, we have realized how much we have overcome our biases through this process of letter writing. And a lot of times, as lawyers and mitigators working on this case, you take a very strict and clinical approach. But through this process, we've not only known who these people are, but also created a very deep personal bonds with them. So I just hope we are able to continue doing this, for as long as we can. Yeah, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you so much. Everyone clap for Baljeet and CP. Thank you. We can now move to questions. I just thought maybe, is there anyone here in the room or online that would like to ask the presenters a question? No. Well, I have a question for you both. I wanted to hear a little bit more from you about what kinds of people you were writing to, maybe a bit about their backgrounds. Like what were their lives like? And if you wanted to also to invite you both to talk a little bit about Project 48, to talk just to give us a bit more, talk about that if you wanted to know a bit more about the project.
Yeah, to say a little bit about their lives before they were arrested, before they were sentenced to death. We have been the organization which has done the first empirical study on who are these people that we are sentencing to death. And based on both, we've got 2 publications, and based on both of them, our findings have been that a majority of these prisoners come from lower socioeconomic background, weaker sections of the society, who live in extreme poverty. A lot of them have had experienced adverse childhood experiences, many traumatic memories, and events that have happened in their life. And they also are people, because of where they're situated, because of their socioeconomic circumstances, are people who end up getting absolutely no help when it comes to quality legal representation. A lot of them end up on death row for many, many years before they get access to good lawyers who can actually represent them. Many of them have said things like, I have not even seen what my lawyer looks like. I've not even seen the person who's fought my case for so many years. Or I met my lawyer just one day before I was sentenced to death. So that's largely where they come from. About our organization, we call Project 39A, and death penalty is one of our core areas of work, but we also do other work such as forensics, legal aid, and prevention of torture. But when it comes to death penalty, we provide death penalty pro bono legal representation to these prisoners, and a lot of our cases are at the highest court in the country, which is the Supreme Court of India. And our legal representation is not just limited to providing help on conviction, but also sentencing, which Baljeet spoke about, where both Baljeet and I work as mitigators here. And our job is to interview these prisoners, interview their family, bring out, aspects of their life history, which are also called mitigating circumstances in the language of law and the language of court, to get them a lesser penalty than death. Yeah, so that's largely what we do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I might just read out one of the questions in the chat in case either of you wanted to respond to it. Really, I forgot my glasses today. So fascinated by the fact that although the prisoners are not allowed access to the libraries, yet they are allowed books sent from the outside. And I'll just either, Baljeet or Phoebe, did you want to respond to that?
I just put a response on the comment also. But the logic there is that these prisoners are often sent to a segregated sort of a jail within a jail, as we call it, setting, where they can only go out of their individual cell in the yard, which is just in front of them, but they can't go out of that sort of containment zone at all. So they can't go out of that limited space, but things can be delivered to them. And because prison manuals have it in them that prisoners can accept letters. So it's sort of a rule that they have to be delivered what is being sent to them, but of course only after screening. Some prisoners also have this practice where they bring, where they ask or assign one of the officials to bring certain books from the library, come into this yard and show it to the prisoners to say that if you want any of these books. So that practice also exists. The only rule there is that they can't go out of that, that smaller area where they are confined.
Thank you. So I'll now introduce Sue Jeong, who is presenting the banned book list, a monument of injustice and intellectual freedom for incarcerated readers.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, great. My name is Jeong, as they already introduced me, and the project I am going to present is called the Bamboo List, a monument of injustice and intellectual freedom. Can you go next? Okay, next. Here's pretty quiet, so let's chant something all together. Just follow me. No new jails, schools not jails.
No new jails,
Schools not jails. This is what we chanted on 6th October 2019 in my neighborhood when I stood on the sidewalk on Manhattan's Chinatown, which is my second home, as a crowd of activist friends and neighbors. And yeah, we marched on the street, and they are reacting to Mayor Bill de Blasio's announcement of a final plan to close the infamous jail complex on Rikers Island and replace it with 4 smaller power-based jails, including one to be constructed nearby at 125 Center Street. And then this is actually the jail in my neighborhood right now. And it's just 7-8 blocks away, and then it has been there forever. Like since like the 19th century, and they just rebuild it. And next, this is the new building they want to construct, and the famous Van Buren Institute designed it. And then it's kind of, to me as an artist, it's shocking. Like there is a culture center, which is an exhibition space, and then as a communist artist, I cannot accept the fact that they're gonna build something underneath the jail, which to show artwork that can represent like me and my neighbors, and to me like nonsense. Wait, next. And then, yes, we didn't like the fact that there is gonna be a high-rise building that look alike. I mean, not look alike, a new jail which look alike high-rise buildings around this neighborhood. We're just so upset about it, and decided to protest. And then that happened since 2019. And then the Bill de Blasio announced it in 2018, and then we didn't believe it. And then at this point, everybody believed it because the city decided to go forward. Go next. Another protest. And then we keep going, but of course that's fine. But the city never ever decided to stop. And that reminds me of the conversation we had in the morning. Like there is a new better jail. No, there's no such thing. I mean, no jail is the best jail. And because I worked with them for my in-your neighbors, and instead of working with pretty museums, I mean, New York is a place for art, everybody knows, and then it's a central part of like contemporary art, and it's kind of, it may sound obnoxious, but you're in that capitalist society, and then I'd rather work with libraries because they are also a culture center and funded by the government, which is very rare in the United States because things are pretty much privately funded, very different from European context. Or like, I'm not familiar with the context here, but context there. And then while I'm working with the library, I found there is the Bamboo List, which is a rare work of art to me, because like it's, as an artist, I don't know like how to show my work to my audience, especially for incarcerated, but I know I can send books to those incarcerated veterans through my library and friends. And then we decided to like collect books.
Give me a second. This is actually a video. So like thousands of books, like the number of books, if you're gonna ask how many, countless. It can go forever. And can we stop and go next? Yes. And then from there, I think I can show the website of, no. Stop and
Yes.
yeah, and then through that with the list, I decided to collect damaged books from the New York Public Library in their storage, and they are just
Sorry.
so that's fine, like not yet.
But let's go back to the slide.
It's a little bit messy. Sorry about that. I'm that kind of artist. I repaired damaged public library books in order to send them to the incarcerated patrons and as a work of art. And it's quite intimate process because they can touch my work. Next. That's okay. Yeah, this is the way to repair books. Like usually books are like has cracked a back or like a missing pages, and then I just find exactly same book from different branches and then fill in the gaps, the information gaps of old books. Next. And then this is the way to show those books in the library where I live in Chinatown. And then with that, during the COVID, everybody knows it's impossible to deliver those things to the actual jail. Things are really, everything is locked down. And then for almost 18 months, nobody had any contact to those people who are incarcerated. And then that's the reason why I started this online channel, even though that's not good enough, since many incarcerated people do not have access to electronic devices in general. And go next. Oh, no. Sorry. And then we can double click. And then we can see the website. No. Can we can have, so you can just, sure.
I need to share this screen. That's
Sure. A lot of tech knowledge. This is part of this conference. Good. Next time, whenever you have time, you can visit this website. The name is really simple, the bandbooklist.org. Go to the about page. You can see the entire background of this project. I'm gonna skip it because time is ticking, and then I do not want to spend too much time on one thing. And then this is part of very little part of the banned book list. And then I just mapped everything like in this kind of shelf way. And then when you go to legend, there are 3 different types of categories. Like one is the banned books that is banned without reasons. Second one is male censorship. The third one is sexually explicit. Sexually explicit is part of the male censorship, but somehow, I mean, I can explain further, but later. Exclude that specific category in their code. And it means like there you cannot have sexual desire through books, and then there is no entertainment through sex, which is very part of our lives. And then this is level 1, the US, like you can see the entire map in this very light green modernist format. And then the next, go to the state. This looks boring, but give me a second. How can I move? Uh-oh. Green. Great. Yes. I categorize it things by state. So like state like California, there is no, you cannot find any reasons why they are banned. Just prison officials decide to ban. But like state like Washington, you can actually see why they're, the reason why they are banned. Also more specifically, like if there is children rated rape kind of situation, like it's sexually explicit, but children related racial discrimination like this, rape like this, security threat like that. So you can simply go and navigate everything. And then there are some states which never disclose their banned book list, or some data sets I'm still working on, but I just want to be transparent about it. And then this is the way we map the entire like banned book list. And it shows 50 states where prison located each state. And then, for example, this is still working. So we are still working on it. So we don't have a full data set. But for example, like when you clicked, I believe it's Colorado, click the one of the jail name, then you can see very similar type of banned book map, but also like this mimic the shape of prison architecture. Like if you're going to go to Kansas, like something like that. Also, you can click and then you can see all the titles. So yeah, I forgot to mention it, but also you can see all the titles when you click each books. Yes, this is a crazy data set. I'm data obsession. So it's like, I just want to reorganize the boring information that can entertain people to see what's the actual data set. And then this is very like qualitative research. And then nobody actually want to see each book title. And then I'm the one who is very interested in what kind of book has been banned. And then, okay, let's go to, give me a second, the sexually explicit part. I can, you know what? Actually, I can just type in the site. Come on, baby. Okay, it's coming. So this is different type of map, and then you can also intuitively feel like what's going on in this map. And then of course this huge boobs is telling what's actually sexually explicit means in prisons. And then there are also different type of categories, like this, for example, like I think Alaska, like you cannot find any book data set, banned book data set here. But Texas, when you double click it, like right now it's banned, but before it wasn't. So give me a second. Let me just give you a better example. Like this one is Iowa, and then when you double click it, you can see the entire like sexually explicit material manga. The reason why I am really interested in manga which is a graphic novel by East Asian. And then manga is very visual and it has very strong voice visually, and then easy to represent certain type of ideas. So prison officials often ban those books as under sexually explicit code. And then obviously like manga is very different from graphic novels created by non-Asian content creators. So there you can see the intersectional moment, how East Asian visual contents were banned based on racial discrimination. And then what I like the most about this map is like, even though this is a huge Americana and then East Asian is only 10% of this entire state, but you can see like whole East Asian can actually like conquer the map without their literal geographical representational shapes. And they're like many of them are just imported and then translated into English, and then as East Asian, like this is, I mean, ridiculous and then horrible, but funny all at once. And then I hope you're gonna have a chance to visit this website and then just explore it. And then it's pretty fun to take a look. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. Go home and tinker and have a look at the website. It's really interesting. So are there any questions for Sue?
The website, is it the band book list or just band book list? Or
The bandbooklist.org, yeah. But if you're gonna search it, I mean, it's not phone friendly yet.
okay.
So I highly recommend to use your own.
Okay, a question.
Just how long did it take, or has it taken you thus far?
I'll bring this to you just so people can hear. I'm not sure.
Just interested to see how long it's taken you thus far to compose this website.
I have been working on since 2019 during the quarantine.
So I could be very productive while I was not in jail, but I was at home, soft confinement, I can tell. And it took then like a little bit more than 2 years. Actually, data collection itself is demanding, but not as stressful. But the most stressful part is programming, perhaps, because there are lots of technological problems behind it. And then in order to design the website, like which allow people to kind of enjoy, it takes the longest, perhaps. Yeah.
Did you do any discussion, or did you have any sort of discussion about the different states on the ban book list in terms of like themes of banning? Like, were there particularly, I'm thinking sort of like the sexual stuff versus potentially anything that could be considered security risk? Like, is there any sort of real themes across that? So when you showed us that giant list from the US and the books between states, yeah. So like, for example, was there a particular theme in California versus, say, for example, Texas or Iowa, or just picking those because you showed those and they're in my mind, but was there anything that you noticed in that space?
I want to find a good answer. It's because the censorship, United States is United States. So each state have their own way to censor books. However, while I'm working on the manga one, especially, I found this is hypothetical like thing. I found a similarity between states when they censor certain books, and then there are a lot of overlaps. So I feel like there are direct communication, I feel, or some state influenced by other states. And the common ground, no matter what is like in California, they don't have any, they don't give any reasons. Like they don't give the shit. they just ban. But some states are really anal about which page it has certain content that should be banned in prison. Very, very specific. And then it's line by line statement. So, I mean, it costs a lot actually to get that information through the Information Act. But literally, like I have to hire the government officer, someone who can research those things, and then I pay hourly, like usually between $35 to $75 per hour. It costs a lot, and like luckily I had been funded, So priority institutions, I have no idea why they decided to support my project because it's against the government, but they somehow want to see it. Or like maybe they like the artistic trajectory I have created, who knows? So yeah, but I don't know that can be, I answered your question or not, but
It's a tricky question. I wasn't expecting an answer, but I thought maybe, like you said, you know, you picked up some things that you've noticed over the time.
right. But what I can tell is like I requested the Freedom of Information Act to all 50 different states, and I heard from only 26 states, and then only 10 gave me reasons why they decided to ban certain books. And the rest is like, there is a list and then which looks very interesting, but there is no specific explanation. Might be better not to disclose. That will make people really upset.
There is a question online, sure. And would you like to unmute and ask your question to Sue?
Yeah, I'm muted. Thanks very much for that. It's hugely interesting. But what made you start the project?
Thank you for asking more that question. Partially because I am from Chinatown in New York, and then I witnessed a lot of linguistic barrier, and then I know learning language is really important in order to communicate with outside. And then that's the reason why I am particularly interested in books in public libraries, which is free. And then the other reason is, as an immigrant, I have many undocumented friends I have been working with for, at this point, almost 8 years. And then while I was working with them, like those undocumented people's lives are really like at risk all the time, and many of them already went jails or prisons because of their legal status in the United States. And then I just want to help them out and then send books to them. And then that was the beginning of this project.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. I'm just going to speak on behalf of Mark, who's made a comment. Mark has written, there are some similar variations between states in so-called Australia. Some allow books to be provided and others don't. Mark, did you want to add any questions to that? We're all good.
All right, thank you so much, Sue. We'll now move on to Anna. He's giving Anna Goodchild is giving her talk 1 year transcending prison walls.
Hello, I'm going to have to share a screen in a minute. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. My project was only a 1 year correspondence with one person. Ian was 50 when he was arrested for a sex offence that he had committed when he was 15. I had met Ian and his family at church, and he was our local preacher, so it came as quite a shock to hear that he was in prison and that had been sentenced to 3 years, of which he would serve 13 months. I started writing to him, and the first letter was very difficult to write, and the letters that came back from Ian describing what he had been doing were nothing like the TV fodder of prison images that we're shown daily. He wrote about all the courses he was doing: tiling, maths, accounting, Bible study, his activities, working in the kitchen, singing in the chapel choir, letter writing, and enjoying the visits from his family every 2 weeks. He wrote about his food choices, what he could drink, his cell, his friends. And when I had to choose a project for my photography degree, I realized that I had these letters which painted such a different picture of life in prison. I thought I would use them. I asked Ian and he was fine with it, and both his family agreed as well. I'm now going to share my screen. Okay, so my correspondence spanned that full year of his incarceration. And the basis of the project was Michel Foucault's Heterotopia, which is just, he describes as a world within a world. And unlike utopias or dystopias, which are imaginary concepts, heterotopias are real physical things. I analysed the letters, both Ian's and mine, because when Ian came out, I asked him if I could have mine back just to read them, and then I gave them back to him. There were several binaries that came up. There was, of course, the call and response, and then there was the inside outside. Both Ian and I wrote about the inside and the outside, and we both had different questions about those places. And they also reflected time and place. Both Ian and I were very conscious of where we both stood in terms of time and place. And there's a paradox which emerged, and that was that the separation which the giant prison walls created also made a connection, because I would never have written to Ian had he not been in jail. And the circularity of this Venn diagram came to me because Dartmoor Prison is built as the only circular prison that I know of in this country. And it was, so this slide represents how I presented my project, which was very much an inside outside. The right-hand side represents the inside, the left-hand side, the outside. And the outside I've represented by plants, which I took from outside the jail in the middle month of every season. And the main function of the plant life in this project is metaphorical, alluding to changes in people as they go through tests and time. A second function is indexical. In increasing numbers of prisons, gardening is becoming more and more important and is considered a form of therapy for the inmates' well-being. You will not, however, often see this in the mass media because it is not a sensational topic. The Royal Horticultural Society awards the Windleston Trophy annually to the best prison garden in England and Wales. And there is the space between the plant and the prison in each diptych represents that wall that has to be overcome, be it a physical wall or a mental, emotional, developmental wall. I would take home the plants, analyze them, name them, and then crush them to make little patterns and images. And when I showed a friend of mine who is a prison lawyer, she said, "Ooh, this reminds me of the protests some prisoners make by smearing their feces over the walls." And as Ian had never mentioned that, I thought I'd better change the present representation. And so I picked a maple leaf from the field maple tree that's on the outside of the prison, and used them as a template to represent the same thing. I printed these leaves on drapes, which I put in my exhibition, and so people walking through them could feel that they were walking through time. This is the outside of the prison, the entrance, over which there is a motto which comes from Virgil's Aeneid, written in about 60 BC, in which Aeneas, who has vast numbers of prisoners of war, says to the Roman guards, "Spare the vanquished and crush the proud." And my question is, when I was doing this project, was to what extent is this relevant in 21st century Britain prisons? As your previous speakers have mentioned, visits are very important. And this represents one of the types of visiting rooms, which is a 1-to-1 or a 3-to-1, where again the inside and the outside is explained, because Ian is on the inside and his visitors are on the outside. I couldn't go into the actual prison in that Ian was held, where Ian was held. So I went into disused Victorian prisons, which in 2013, 5 of them became decommissioned. And so I traveled to those to see what I could photograph. When Ian came out, I asked him if I could take some photographs of him, because obviously I didn't have any, and so I set up a little scene, and he very gladly obliged. This is Ian. One of the courses he did was tiling, and his tiling tutor was so pleased with his progress that he took a photograph and then gave it to Ian on his release. And when Ian came to visit me on one of the occasions, he showed me this photograph and asked if I wanted to use it in my project, which obviously I did. Another part of my project was making quilts, making a quilt in cyanotype. 2 reasons. One, that Fine Cell is an organization in this country which goes into prisons to teach prisoners, men and women, how to make quilts. And the second reason was that there is an organization near me which uses prisoners on day release to work in the garden and make pottery and develop their woodworking skills. And so I made this quilt starting in the top left-hand corner with an empty seedling tray, and so that it develops all the way around until we get to a pumpkin. And at the bottom of this image, you can see in my exhibition, I recreated a cell, which is based on a monk cell of the Middle Ages. And there is the quilt. On here, you will see the facsimiles of all the correspondence that Ian received. And there is, he made himself a crucifix from his tiling days. And some of you will have seen the book, which has very kindly been put on the Carceral website. And I decided not to have any text on the cover, but I thought I would let the leaves do the talking, representing the 4 seasons of the year that Ian spent in jail. And it's in a window, so it invites people to look in. There is a rhythm, just as there are the 4 seasons represented by the leaves. There are 4 sections to every signature in the book. The first one is the diptych, followed by my letter to Ian, followed by Ian's reply, and his reply is sewn into the middle of each signature, followed by another diptych. Ian spent a lot of his time writing letters. He was in his cell for about 10 he was out for 10 hours a day, and the rest of the time he spent in his cell. He spent writing letters and reading his Bible. Exercise time was important to him and to the others, and the chapel visits were very important, and his choir singing. And this is the prison seen from the outside, which most people will see and identify as the Dartmoor jail, right in the middle of Dartmoor National Park. On his release, Ian was met with more barriers, more do not go areas by people by society who would not let him forget that he was in jail, that he had been in jail. And it was very, very difficult to make his life again. The walls from Ian, as I said, were a paradox of separation and connection, but they were also interfaces with the world and the world within a world, which allowed a flow of information to place, but that information was mediated by whoever it was that was writing it. And so the reality that met Ian when he came out was different. This is a false dandelion straddling the granite prison walls at Dartmoor Jail. It observes what goes on inside and outside the prison, and she alone can witness and decide to what extent look after the vanquished applies today. And this is the poem that I wrote about the project. The only thing I'd like to explain is that the agape is the Greek word for spiritual love. And one of the people who came to visit the exhibition also said he was very surprised, because he said that's what you greet people with in Greece. Yeah, and then that's it. These are my details. Unlike mediated prison genre images, the images that I made reflect, and the diptychs reflect, the perspective of personal development and rehabilitation practices as recounted in letters spanning 1 year, which was 2016, spent in prison in Britain. And what if informed my question for writing? And Ian replied.
Thank
If
you.
anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Anna. I just clap for all the amazing.
I can't hear.
Oh, sorry. We're just clapping for you and all the other presenters. Yeah. Are there any questions for Anna here in the room or in the chat?
Hi, Anna, that was wonderful. What was Ian's response to the project?
I kept him informed every step of the way, because I only started writing it when he came out, because that's when I realized that I had this bundle of letters. He was very pleased with it. He wrote in the visitor's book at the exhibition how realistic the little room was. And because I had somebody reading the letters over a loudspeaker, that, you know, wherever you went in the exhibition, you could hear these letters being read. He said it was a very poignant moment when he sat down at that same little desk that I had put in the room, that that it just brought it all back again. And he was really pleased with it. And I showed him my dissertation before I sent it in, and he was fine with it. So, and he said, because I asked him, did you feel that you were being exploited at any point? And he wrote in the visitor's book that at no point did he feel that he was being exploited, and that he would have pulled out at any point had he felt that he was being used in any way. So I was very pleased that he actually wrote that down.
I have a question. Maybe it's more, I would like to ask it to all the presenters, but I know I've talked a lot. So, right, I can't see it that way. So I'll come back through here.
Hello, Anna, it's Diana here. We've met before. I think that you said to me when we met that you hadn't had any personal experience with the prison before this. So my question is, how did your understanding or view of the prison change through this experience in this project?
Mostly, I can only go through Ian's letters. He didn't mention any violence or mostly violence, because what we see in certainly in the UK, and I know in the USA, of prison life is the unbelievable violence, the drugs, the abuse of prisoners and of guards. And he didn't mention any of that. When he came out, I said to him, did you have any experience? And he said there was just one uprising in the whole time that he was there. So there was one incidence of violence, but he hadn't mentioned it in his letters. And I, you know, the relationship between tutor and prisoner, I thought was really, really touching. And the regime in the prison seemed to be very much for rehabilitation of offenders. And that came out very strongly in the letters, which I thought was very encouraging, because we don't hear about that. And that's why, you know, I wanted to sort of broadcast really the very ordinary elements of prison life, which made Ian's letters really extraordinary. Yeah, does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just I thought I would have my question if there's any in the chat or in the room, and for any of the presenters to respond to if they wanted to, but just kind of picking up on the themes or the themes that all your pieces touch upon, which is like, you know, objects and texts and art, and you know, just thinking about the title for this panel, like how would you frame your projects as forms of resistance? Like, what does that mean, and guess in the context of your art or your the letter writing, the website, like, yeah, just open to people who want to respond to that if they want to.
I get that.
Hello. I can go first. Resistance. I think what I have been done, I mean, it's basically collecting data, and which is not really widely available to the public, and then people are not that interested in what kind of books are banned in prison. I mean, there is no such kind of things, because there are just too many books are banned without right reasons. And in order to have intellectual freedom as just a human, like, make those information accessibly itself is a huge to me it's resistance itself, since things are inaccessible in prison. That's simple. And yeah, maybe other people have some good respond to the resistance, cultural resistance too.
I did say that, but I'm not sure if they can hear me. Yeah, Anna or Baljeet, or yeah, if you wanted to respond, you're very welcome to, but not obligated to. Just wanted to give you all opportunity to say some final words. But yeah, if not, we can wrap up. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming along. It was a really amazing panel. Thank you.